Namaskar and welcome to Daily Global Insights, episode 281. Do like this program and help it go viral. Today is Thursday, November the 18th, and we begin with news from China. China's military now has the capability to conduct a full scale invasion of Taiwan and has added new missiles and amphibious ships to the People's Liberation Army for an attack on the island democracy, according to the latest annual report of a Congressional China Commission. Let's welcome our co-host Sridhar Chityalaji. Sridharji, what is the latest on the Congressional report about China's military preparedness to invade Taiwan, sir?
Namaskar, good morning to everybody. Good evening, good afternoon, and good day, wherever you are. Looking forward to another exciting day today, on November the 18th. Well, I think that it is just reaffirming what has been confirmed by Pentagon and a number of sources. The flotilla of capabilities of China is now full-fledged. They have carriers, they have cyber, they have drones, they have amphibious assault ships. So they are ready, if they choose to, they are ready to launch an attack and invade Taiwan. That's the report that is coming from the Congressional Committee. The only reason why it could be delayed is because of the 2022 Winter Olympics. So that could possibly delay China's invasion. That's the only salvation. And some analysts also predict maybe 2025. But based on all the stuff, they seem to be fairly ready to move forward.
And the US needs allies to host missiles to deter China, according to panel of advisors. So on the one side, US says some countries are its allies. On the other side, it says that other countries who should be allies are partners. And then it dissolves the one thing that was actually having some definition, something that could have effectively deterred this ambitions of China, which is the Quad. Sridharji, I am having difficulty keeping up. Muddled thinking in the United States or the Biden administration, or are they ignorant?
Well, I think it's basically they have taken a posture or a position, which is any policy which Trump enacted is not a good policy, so it has to be countered with an alternate policy. So they started with Quad. They had in March earlier this year a virtual summit, and then that followed up with October. But if you see, it has relegated itself to some vaccines, artificial intelligence, all kinds of things that are irrelevant in the strategic context with which Quad was formed. And when you look at series of news that we'll be covering today, you can see it's a hodgepodge and a jamboree of activities, but with no leadership and cohesion in place. Quad was built and Quad coalition was formed with Japan in the leadership role, followed by United States, then of course India, and then Australia joined. So that was the Quad. Now that whole thing is diluted, and United States is struggling. So you can see that even their dialogue with Korea didn't go well. Philippines is having a dialogue with Japan. So and now they're looking to deter. Where's the basis in which we can deploy some strategic weapons. This is the unfortunate and sad situation that the United States in its leadership role is currently in a state of mess.
And viewers, please remember that the observation that the Quad is dead came first from PGurus, first from Sridhar Chityalaji. So let's tip our hat to him for being prescient in predicting that this is gone. Let's move on to the next news item. US, EU, Japan to renew partnership against non-economic practices of third world countries and to reform WTO. WTO is the World Trade Organization. Sridharji, if you constantly keep defining the charters of all these organizations, I mean, many countries cannot just keep up, Sridharji. I mean, what is the reason or rationale behind this?
Well, I think in one simple word, there's no leadership. I think so. You have now EU and Japan and United States working together basically to come up with a set of terms which effectively, indirectly will implicate China as the one nation which breaks the WTO treaty with a whole range of subsidies and other kinds of programs. So the target is China. They're going to use the WTO framework. What does it do? China will do more because China has its own allies and partners. And then they go on to say that, we now need to look at WTO and, basically think about reforming the organization. To me, post-World War II, all these central organizations have not been reformed. That's the reason why the world is in a mess. Doesn't matter whether it is WHO, doesn't matter whether it is WTO, doesn't matter whether it is UNICEF, doesn't matter whether it is United Nations. It's a mess, basically because nobody has been willing to do a reform.
And Japan and South Korea pull out of news conference with the United States due to historical bilateral differences, according to Deputy Secretary of State Wendy Sherman. Sridharji, didn't the United States know about it's been a long-standing rivalry between South Korea and Japan, and why did they even try to get all these people together?
I mean, there is a logical question for which I don't have a logical answer, so except to say that Wendy Sherman is renowned. If you remember, Wendy Sherman was the one, Deputy Secretary of State, who was hosted by China, who got a little bit of a snub. In the same seat, Wendy Sherman sat. 1 week later, you had the Taliban leader sitting there and negotiating with the Chinese. So the same leader, is negotiating with Japan and Korea. In the meanwhile, the proceeds of the sale of the Mitsubishi Electric in Korea, they feel that should be the payout for the reparations to Koreans for the ill treatment of the Japanese, the Korean women by the Japanese during World War II. So this is the substantive issue. They have not been resolved. They have not resolved at all. They have this meeting. And then you find only Wendy Sherman coming up to the press conference and responding to the questions. I mean, this is the point where we set the strategic context. If you look at Indo-Pacific or Asia or Taiwanese trade or East Asia, it's a complete mess of these types of events and activities, which only emboldens China to continue to persist with its strategy.
And Philippines and Japan are to hold bilateral 2+2 talks, and in a phone call, Duterte calls Japan an unrivaled bilateral partner. Sridharji, this is all good and dandy and everything. Bilateral partnerships, they have a limited scope. If one is a senior partner in that, I can see some kind of quid pro quo that might work. What do you see as the advantages for Japan to have a bilateral pact with Philippines, sir?
Indo-Pacific, South China Sea, slipping into East China Sea, slipping into Taiwan Strait. Where is United States? United States, if you remember, has a treaty already with Philippines, and that just was attempted to be renewed, for presence of the U.S. ships in Philippines. As we speak, there are some incursions that are going on by the Chinese in the Scarsbury Shoals Island, which is adjacent to Spratlys. And there is also Coast Guard, which has now been empowered as a navy, firing cannonballs at the Philippines fishermen. So what does Philippines do? Philippines says, where is United States? Where is Quad? Where is all these vessels which are supposed to be navigating and acting as a deterrent? So who is the person who is taking much more active interest and whom I can reach out to? Japan. Japan is the third largest, economy, and it has clearly expressed desire to preserve open maritime boundaries around the South China Sea. It is expanding its budget, defense budget more specifically. It says, let's work together. Maybe you are the guy who is going to help me because I don't see anybody else.
And as China pushes for digital trade pact with New Zealand and Singapore, the United States calls for Indo-Pacific rules for digital trade and artificial intelligence. Again, this is another one of those formations happening. I mean, US is trying hard to try and contain China, except that it needs boots on the ground. Diego Garcia or Hawaii is the nearest listening post for US. I thought Japan would be would perform that function, but looks like Japan is not very confident under the current administration of help should China indulge in some adventurism? What do you think, sir?
Well, I think that the China is engaged and indulging in adventurism every day. It is almost by default you have some kind of deterrence that happens, or Chinese by their own volition, pull back. So there's nothing. So the cohesive group that was existing is absent. The patrols that used to be made in the South China Sea around that area has ceased. Remember Quad. Go back to Quad in March. What did they say? Development of 5G, development of 6G, development of AI, development of cybersecurity, development of other kind of deterrent infrastructure, development of electronic vehicles, in addition to preserving open maritime in the Indo-Pacific and South China Sea. Now, what does China do? China does a deal with New Zealand and Singapore. Where is Singapore? Singapore is with ASEAN. We'll come to another news item where we are going to see ASEAN being invited to Britain for a EU summit. In the meanwhile, China signs a deal on digital impact, digital trade with New Zealand and Singapore. So what does this leave from a coordination and an organization and orchestration of an integrated policy? This is the jamboree that I'm talking about when we set the context in the beginning. All the Quad agenda has been diluted, and they have this AUKUS, they have the EU now coming in because they recognize there is no leadership from United States. There's no leadership, zero. And we have a new Japanese prime minister who has a probably slightly modulated policies relative to what Shinzo Abe was advocating, and which is the reason why Shinzo Abe is back in the Japanese parliament as one of the leaders of the advocacy group to make sure that the LDP agenda is not compromised.
And you are right, sir. G7 nations with the European Union are to invite a 10-member ASEAN nation foreign ministers to Britain to expand trade ties and hold security dialogue with China in mind. So you just touched upon this. So let's move on to the next item. Germany may have been naive on China at first, says a reluctant Merkel. Merkel is a PhD, true in nuclear science, I think, nuclear physics, I think. I just find it incredible that somebody of that kind of an intellect would say something like this.
Well, at least I admire her for accepting and owning to the mistake. But it's astonishing that she took a posture that she took, recognizing what it will do to Germany and EU more specifically. Germany is a net exporter. Germany drives, the exports of Germany drives EU. What you do is you bring China and give navigation and gateway, and then you try to strike a partnership. The next thing is they're going to eat you for lunch. That's exactly what started to happen. And now suddenly Angela Merkel realizes that, oh my God, I misunderstood the Chinese in terms of the policy decisions that I made. I think she has done two major blunders. One is this open refugee and open border policy, which is hurting Germany. And given that the world is inundated with left-wing media, you hear nothing about it. And the second is, of course, her trades and association with China. And if I should not forget the third, which is the one that she has very close ties and relationship with Russia, which is contrary to what EU's agenda is.
Sridharji, for my understanding and for the understanding of our viewers here, is Russia the only source for heating gas for the Europe?
Right now, that is the only one. The alternate is coming from Qatar, but then Qatar has to pass through Iran, has to pass through Turkey, and before it reaches the mainland Europe, which is the Qatari's intention. And then remember, if it has to pass through Iran, you have trade sanctions prevalent, so you have a whole raft of issues adjacent to that. And then Turkey itself has found natural gas reserves, and then it is aspiring to be an effective competitor to the Qataris. Then you have a small basin that is just off Israeli coast, where the natural gas is being assessed by the Israelis through exploration. And now Turkey is saying, we have stake to that specific area, which of course Israelis flatly deny. So you have a whole raft of issues. So the only one which has an easy conduit and pipe is Russia, and Russia then what does it do? It has Belarus and Ukraine on its radar. So therefore, this natural gas, which is required to to augment the energy supplies of Europe as it begins to shift, it's what you call the supply chain. You find that it is in the middle of this mess.
Thank you for that clarification, sir. Although I thought US could help because US does have natural gas reserves and it's an alternate way by sea. Maybe, I don't know, maybe natural gas has to be liquefied, which means under pressure. Maybe it is not as easy to transport as perhaps through a pipeline. I could be wrong about this. We'll wait and see. I think United Kingdom has its own gas reserves, if I remember correctly, because of its North Sea field. I'm not 100% sure again, because you don't hear UK, United Kingdom having these problems. It's last winter, Sridharji, some countries, Eastern Bloc especially, they had a miserable time. There was no hot water, there was no heating, so people couldn't take shower even once a week sometimes. It was really, really bad, and I think it's going to be a replay this year too.
Oh, I think that I don't know about UK having it's more the methane rather than the natural gas. That's my observation. Also, I think the United Kingdom has been shifting to forgetting the natural gas more. Their challenges has been around the lack of enough wind energy. So they have had wind energy as one of the sources of fuel, natural renewable energy fuel, and they've had some challenges, and that supply has been dwindling. So they have not had an augmentative capacity to increase. That is why UK had problems more than the natural gas.
And EU is going to send aid to migrants at Belarus border. See, this is again, what is EU's responsibility here? Why isn't Turkey being put on the mat for sending truckloads or plane loads of illegals across to Belarus? I mean, which country would do something like this? Seems absolutely insane to me, Sridharji.
Well, I think EU considers itself as an extension of United Nations. It probably believes that it needs to be caring and supportive of the global refugee order. So therefore, it says perhaps if you give assistance and aid to the people who are genuinely suffering, they've all were promised the moonland and they landed in this Belarus, and then they're stuck between the rock and the hard place at the Belarus border with no passageway into Europe. Apparently it is substandard conditions and it's extremely cold already. The full winter has not kicked in. So they feel that from a humanitarian point of view, they have to send the relief. I mean, Turkey doesn't believe in when was the last time Turkey or Saudi Arabia or any of these West Asian nations have sent humanitarian aid and relief to any of the countries? I don't recall. Perhaps, I don't read the same news that everybody else reads, but I don't see any humanitarian aid. It is either to African continent or to the pan, Central Asia, or to the West Asia, Middle East, West Asian countries. You see all the aid going from either United States or going from EU and other nations.
Well, if something is illegal, then by giving aid to these people, then you are actually encouraging this illegality even more. I mean, I understand that people have to live, that they are starving otherwise, but the person or the country that put them in the first place should have thought through these ramifications. And I just find it stunning. Amid tensions with China, Indian Army and IAF conduct joint exercises to strengthen logistics supply in the northern sector. Sridharji, now winter has set in, so I can expect that some cooling will happen. And I also am told that the Chinese side, all those people camped in the Ladakh and along the LAC, they require, they don't fare very well in these extremely cold climates at extremely high altitudes, unlike India, which is war hardened. And I'm wondering if say China does a strategic retreat where they don't come and occupy the front post, maybe India should move in and sit there.
Well, I think first and foremost, I just don't know whether China will ever do a strategic retreat. What China will do is China will engage in a game of disengagement. And they will preach all the good things in the world. The Indian army and the Indian government will listen to them, in a very careful manner. And they say, you move 5 steps backward, I'll move 3 steps backward. And then what will happen is India will move 5 steps backward, and China will move 3 steps forward, or 4 steps backward and 6 steps forward. This has been the case as far as the Indo-Chinese disengagement is concerned. They have cleverly played this game, and India time and again, falls into this specific trap. And I think this is well reported by all the specialists, even who speak in the PGurus programs, the people with specific expertise in this war strategy. But at least now with these integrated forces, you are beginning to see coordinated effort between two most critical branches. I won't be surprised if Navy gets involved very soon, because Navy becomes very critical both on the reconnaissance as well as for some of the other launch capabilities that would act as a deterrence in case Chinese entertain some mischief.
And Indian Navy's plan to become a 170 ship force on track. 39 naval vessels currently under construction, according to Vice Chief of Naval Staff. Sridharji and viewers, we had put out a situation about how many ships are there with various countries. US clocks in at 295. China is at 366. And India's plan to build 170 ships, and that too over a 5-year period, is still not going to catch up, because by the time I think China would have 1,000 ships. I mean, you can think of doing deterrence, but if you are outnumbered 5-1 or 10-1, one wonders whether this policy goes far enough. Maybe there is constraints about economics. I have no idea. Your thoughts on this plan of India, sir?
Well, I think, if you analytically look at this, China covers a vast part of the world, right? So therefore, they have aspirations in Pacific, which stretches all the way into Alaska. Then they have into East China Sea. They have aspirations into Taiwan Strait. They have aspirations into South China Sea. They have aspirations into Malacca Strait. They have aspirations into Straits of Hormuz. So therefore, India only looks at Indian Ocean and Indo-Pacific. So that is the terrain that India focuses on from a geographic point of view. It doesn't entertain the idea of to be the global navy of force, circumnavigating the world and looking after all the affairs. So from the African continent, which is the Gulf of Aden, to all the way into the Malacca Strait, and possibly even stretching into South China Sea, is the aspiration of India. So therefore, you can compare 500 ships or 400 ships of China with 170 ships. The fact that they have 170 ships is actually in itself a very good program, recognizing that they are now thinking of much more extensive patrolling of the sea relative to where they were maybe 5 years ago.
And China, engaged in a border war with India, threatens freedom of navigation in international waters, tells US Senator John Cornyn. I think he's from Texas, if I remember correctly. I think now there was a delegation of even Democratic senators visiting India, wasn't it, sir?
Correct. It is post that event. John Cornyn has spoken. Yes, he's from Texas, which basically means that we are beginning to see some semblance of, at least on the pro-India, China deterrence policy coming out. Remember the last time a U.S. diplomat spoke about this, or a U.S. representative spoke, was Mike Pompeo, who stood and basically said, we stand with India. We are not going to allow China to kind of make its own mischief in this Himalayan region.
And in a big boost to India's goal of achieving 500 gigawatt non-fossil fuel power generation capacity by 2030, the government has allowed the bundling of renewable to replace thermal power under existing power purchase agreement. Who has this agreement been signed with, Sridharji?
the Power Generation Authority in India procures. So basically saying it's time now for you, under the power procurement agreement, we will buy similar amount, but you start substituting. If you have no capacity to produce renewable energy, then partner with institutions both for capital and generation point of view, and use that agreement once it is produced to supply to us, so that we can begin to have progressive replacement of the fuel from renewable sources rather than from the energy inefficient coal.
There's an interesting problem that comes up when you're talking about, green energy and so on and so forth. Sridharji, if you think about having a solar panel in your house, it is going to generate to you direct current. Now, if you want to use that thing and feed that into the national grid, you have to convert the direct current into alternating current, 15% loss in efficiency. Now, so that thing goes and okay, fine. Now, what happens is, supposing inside your house you have LED bulbs. Because these LED bulbs are burning off of the AC, there is a AC to DC conversion that is happening because LED bulbs need DC. So look at this, that is another 15% loss. So you're losing 30%. I have my own solar panel. I have LED lights in my house, but in order to burn that LED light, I lose 30%. What I'm trying to underline, and this was underlined in a beautiful talk that I attended by Professor Ashok Jhunjhunwala of IIT Madras, is that India needs to have a policy to say, okay, if you have a solar panel, here is an alternate line, which is a straight DC. And that line could be used to light LEDs and other things, which are the next generation light sources. Just my thought. I don't know whether India is thinking along those lines. I mean, we'll wait and track that. But these are some of the actual tangible problems that countries face when they have to switch off of fossil fuels and into green energy.
Well, which is the reason why China is increasing its mining capacity, expanding its thermal capacity, but the more supply of coal. They're importing more coal from, perhaps from Central Asia as well as from Russia. They care, while they are very good with Mr. Biden in terms of saying, oh, we'll do everything that you want, and it's all in paper, and we can issue a joint statement, but the reality is anything but is different. Remember, China is not gone not gone towards minus 1.5. Chinese today are at plus 2.5 relative to the target of the minus 1.5 that is envisaged. So they're increasing, notwithstanding all the hullabaloo which is made about the containment of the greenhouse gases, etc. So they're going the opposite way. They're saying, I have to power the industries, I have to get the employment, etc. So your point about these electronic vehicles and electronic energy, as well as the renewable sources of energy, on a captive basis, I think it has probably served. From a domestic retailing point of view, how effective and how efficient today relative to where it needs to be, I think experts can opine on that. But I think, as you point out, that there is some distance to cover before you get to that point.
And national monetization pipeline only includes assets of the center, and state assets are out of its purview as of now, says the finance minister. This is talking about the national monetization assets, of which I guess the first one was the Air India sale. I don't know why the finance minister had to leave out state assets, Sridharji. In fact, the state assets are much more misused than the central assets. If anything, they need to go first.
Exactly. I think you need to listen to PGurus 5 minutes video around that 15 kilometers to 50 kilometer border security force incursion. You saw that it was in national interest. So people immediately started to claim, hey, you are violating the state sovereignty. I think the finance minister is saying, well, we are not yet ready to come into and negotiate with you on the state sovereignty. But first, we have enough assets to monetize so we can redeploy that cash from an economic point of view. So I think that's all I can kind of allude. So somebody would have stated, hey, you are pinching my asset and taking some money without giving me anything. So that's what prompted to make the statement, sir.
So, as much as we deplore the lack of leadership in the United States, a developed country, look at some of the regional leaders in India who happen to be, occupying positions of power. What kind of an IQ they have, and what kind of an approach they have in terms of how to serve their people best. Pathetic, pathetic.
I mean, to have a little bit of I don't have the IQ to measure their IQ, sir. So therefore, I'll leave it at that.
The Indian cabinet approved the construction of 32,152 kilometers road in far-flung areas of the country at a cost of 33,822 crores. So it looks like it's 1 crore per kilometer, in terms of the acquisition cost and then laying the road, maintaining it, putting lights, signals, all that stuff. And Modi says that this will help rural development and faster access to remote areas. Absolutely. I think the most important thing that has not been discussed even by us, and I think we're going to start looking at this, is how much China is forcing India to spend in specific sectors that it might have not spent. Essentially, it is another way to bankrupt a nation. If you go back 30 years, Reagan bankrupted Russia by forcing space wars on Russia. I don't know if that's what China is thinking, Siddharji. These guys are very careful about these things.
No, I think I look at it differently. I think national infrastructure, the plan that the flagship policy program that Modi ji has embarked on, or the present regime has embarked on, is a fundamental imperative to the development of the nation as a nation that will soon have to be recognized as a developing nation. So therefore, they are not bleeding. And the great concept is that this is public-private partnership. So therefore, a lot of the infrastructure investments is coming from overseas as opposed to domestic. Russia never has privatized. Russia has never encouraged private capital. Russia has never allowed other nations to come in. So therefore, yesterday we covered a very simple topic. We asked the question. The question was asked and I responded, which is to say, why is India taking $61 million, very small amount of money, of loan from ADP to develop Agartala city? It's a capital, whether it is debt or equity or whether it is private investment, you are getting the money as long as there's an economic payback. So to me, India is much more wiser the way it is developing its internal infrastructure as the flagship program in terms of making India a far better place and connecting everything else, both from a security point of view, but also from the point of view of people movement, but more importantly, logistics and trade. That is the more critical thing. India has suffered from what you call as speed breakers as well as deterrence in terms of movement of people and movement of goods produced, which is the reason why a large amount of goods produced never reaches because of the arterial logger jams. They are also building these logistical nodes, which allows grid points and then from there to distribution into various methods of transport. So to me, I will not find that China is bleeding. China has done one thing very good, which is it has made sure India is far more powerful and far more aggressive and waking them up from their slumber, especially around the border areas.
Thank you for that clarification. And India, along with a group of 33 countries, has been engaging in achieving a permanent solution to public stockholding issues on procurement for preserving food security. Sridharji, this used to be managed by a corporation called Food Corporation of India. Is this now something that is going to be added to that, or is this a separate body? Your thoughts, sir?
Well, I think that this is now by the Food and Agricultural Ministry negotiating with the World Trade Organization as well as the appropriate authority. What happens is food security is one of the pivotal areas. So the subsidy regime always takes up issue, and there are four countries which come into this food subsidy is concerned. Japan, which protects its rice farmers. China, which introduces subsidies in every format. Then you have United States, which also used agricultural subsidies to protect its farmers as well as to protect the produce within United States. And then, of course, India. there is a threshold called 10% of your production is the upper limit, beyond which if you introduce subsidies to protect yourself, then you are violating the WTO. Both in 2019 and 2020, India extended past, and these 33 nations decided India should not be called, very similar to United States was not called for when it violated this. So what the proposition that India says is that, I have to make sure that the fruit that I produce, I give an incentive by way of subsidy so that it is retained within the nation and procured by the government, and in meeting the needs of its domestic people, because we have 800 million or 1.2 billion people to feed. So this is the whole advocacy behind the specific program. I think India has to be lauded for taking the rest of the people forward with it, and rather than being, going by blind rules as a matter of fact.
And while we are discussing these things, there's a spirited discussion going on in the comment section about the LED, the DC source of the LEDs and things like that. I think that's what is really needed. That's the difference. While we are discussing something, somebody is actually taking the pain to explain how you can have a completely wired house from your own solar energy source, and these are all a must have. India gets abundant solar energy. The sun is always shining in India, and these are all good things to have. I encourage these conversations to go on. Please feel free to add these things in our comment section also, because this part is not visible to many people when this thing goes live, is my point. The final Afghan evacuees who had been housed at Fort Lee, the first evacuee camp set up on US soil, have now been processed and resettled in the country, the Biden administration announced on Wednesday. This is 25,000 roughly, and out of the total of 69,000 plus. This is according to Robert Fenton Jr., Homeland Security Department senior response official. Sridharji, is this now done? No more of those plane loads coming from Afghanistan, or is it still happening, sir?
Oh, the plane loads may be trickle fed, but we remember that about 79,000 people came in, 79 or 80, 75,000 people came in. 25,000 people have now been released and integrated in the country. There's no data available, vetting, validation, what happened, but 25,000 are now mainstream Americans. Whether they are green card holders or temporary visa holders, we will be fast-tracked into green card and citizenship, we don't know. Then we have the other 45,000 they will release, so which means they're dispensing these people at a very rapid rate, given that 2022 elections are not too far away. So that is the main message. And but there are several investigations that are likely to commence depending on who is going to be in power around this whole Afghan exit and this refugee program.
And a top Biden official, Jake Sullivan, is under fire for the botched Afghan exit and the Durham indictments. We understand the Afghan exit. A little bit more light on the Durham indictments, Sridharji.
Durham is conducting a parallel investigation, continuing from the Trump administration, whether there was, malice and improper use of the John Steele dossier, which relates to that there was Russian interference in United States elections. As it turns out, that the whole thing was a shimazel, if I have to say. Even Adam Schiff has been rebuffed, and he's going round and round the mulberry bush around trying to defend himself on this. And apparently, Sullivan was actively involved in either preempting, propagating, supporting, advocating this. So he's on, and they've asked, Republicans have asked, GOP has asked, you resign because you've got two problems. One, you are botched up Afghan exit, and the second is you continue to, advocate something that is not correct, and you can be a Deputy National Security Advisor.
And House GOP ICE probes of Afghan pullout, Fauci and Hunter Biden if they win back majority. It's a very mouth-watering prospect, Sridharji, because we'll be in the front and center of following some of these developments.
Indeed, I think that let us see what comes out of it. But historically, between Democrats and Republicans, they never come to any conclusion. It's all political point scoring. let us hope that there is an indictment and there is, there is some conclusive outcome that comes out, which is meaningful and material. Otherwise, the same practices will continue because it's just like today I'm in power, tomorrow I'm out of power. Today I'm in power, so I take my agenda. If that is the case, then the nation doesn't benefit.
And conservative majority court has been chosen to rule on Biden vaccine mandate on private employers. We will wait and see how this plays out. Let's take a look at markets. All three market indices were down despite good earnings and retail sales numbers, backed by inflation threats and the ability to meet retail demand. Sridharji, this is the last item for today, and maybe you can share your thoughts, because now the earnings season is over. It looks like all the companies have done well. The Dow continues to go up. Some days it has a down day. For the rest of the year, your prediction, sir?
I think the rest of the year we'll continue to see an uptick. We'll probably cover a little more in detail in our Sunday special edition on markets. But
Yes.
The story is that there is no adversarial data, and we'll continue to see an uptick. Retail spend has been pretty good, notwithstanding the fact there's been logistical issues. And the market indexes you are talking about, is slipping here and there, 50 to 100 or 150 points. We are at 36,500 and Dow. We are over 4,700 in S&P. And so, we are in actually stellar numbers by way of the market index positions relative to where we started. We have already indicated that Dow and Nasdaq are at close to 18 to 20% right now as we speak, depending on the day, and S&P has gone past 25% in terms of the year-over-year gain. So yeah, it's a stellar year, and I think we'll wrap it up with a stellar year. 2022 as well doesn't look that bad from a headwinds point of view. As I say, we'll do a more detailed one as we get closer to the end of the year for 2022. But on Sunday, we will cover a little more around what happened around the week.
And that brings us to a close of today's edition. Viewers, we need your support for our Sunday programs. Sunday programs on markets are much more in-depth, and I'd like to see each and every one of you also watch that. I know Sunday is a day when people want to kick back and relax, but the idea of putting a markets program on Sundays with in-depth coverage is for you to help you decide what you would like to invest in the following week, should you be an investor. But overall, the markets are the sentiments that tell you, because markets are always based on future predictions. It's not today. If the market is going to do well tomorrow, the stock market goes up today in expectation of a better tomorrow. So this is why it is important to listen to and watch segments on markets. Sridharji has been intimately involved with the United States stock market. He's a banker himself. He's also a venture capitalist. He knows which way the winds are blowing. And it's important that you will gain a lot of knowledge by listening and watching that program. I hope you give us the same kind of support that you do on our daily global insights. So we are off for the week now. We'll be back again on Sunday, 11 a.m. IST. Thanks for joining. Sridharji, as always, pleasure having you co-hosting this program, sir. Namaskar, and we'll see you on Sunday.
Namaskar. I recall the sentiments of Sree. Continue to support us, continue to press the like button, continue to economically support us, because this is not a advertisement-driven channel. This is a channel driven by people like yourselves, and your contributions will continue to help Sree and PGurus to strive and produce more quality content that benefits all of you as you spend a day or a week or month, etc. So therefore, your support is a fundamental imperative in further development of all the stuff that happens around the PGurus ecosystem.